Yes, you're reading the title correctly. We are talking about the Lockwood 300 again and the dual trigger. Now, why? Because if you've been living under a rock, well, basically what happened was this. Raven Software recently removed the dual trigger from rotation. Season 1 Reloaded patch came along, they reintroduced it, but it had no changes, so it was still back to its crazy broken self, one-shotting at about 9 meters, and it was ridiculous. And then a few days after Season 1 Reloaded, they removed the dual trigger again from rotation. So hopefully when they reintroduce it, it's been balanced. But with today's video, what I wanted to do was share with you guys my thoughts on, did Raven Software actually shoot themselves in the foot with this thing, making it a one-shot kill? Are they ever going to be able to balance this thing accordingly with its one-shot, or does it just not need a one-shot at all? So I'm going to share with you guys my thoughts on this and give you guys my idea for it. Now, what you're seeing in the gameplay is me using the Doom bundle, but I am not using the dual trigger, obviously, because it's been removed. And this thing still has a really good two-shot, but you have to be aiming down sights completely because the hip fire damage is different than aim down sights. So it's really difficult to use, but it is fun, although very difficult. And you'll also see some good riveter gameplay as I was testing it out for the patch notes I'm going to have in my next video. So let's just go ahead and talk about the Lockwood. So I've always wanted to see what a one-shot shotgun would be like in the context of Warzone, and as we saw with this particular one, it's a bit rough. Now, we did also have the Bryson 800, which was a one-shot in the beginning of Modern Warfare 2's Warzone iteration, which it was a one-shot out to about 4 or 5 meters or so. Really, really strong, but a little overbearing. But in my opinion, the Lockwood 300 takes the cake for the most overbearing one-shot shotgun we've had. So what's the deal? Will it ever be balanced if they have a one-shot kill? And I honestly think yes, this gun still deserves to have a one-shot capability because it's a lot of fun, and this game's all about fun, but also we need to keep it in check, right? I'm not saying it needs to be a one-shot out to 5, 10, 15 meters. I like shotguns, of course, but I don't want them to be oppressive. I want them to have a place in the meta and be solid and have some high risk and high reward gameplay that really incentivizes you to get super close to enemies. So my solution is simple. Let's consider first the MX Guardian. One of the things that you cannot use on this gun is the Dragon's Breath ammo attachment unless you are using the burst trigger to get a burst fire shotgun. So once you have that burst trigger on, it basically unlocks Dragon's Breath for the shotgun and you are able to use it. I think that a similar situation should be happening with the Lockwood 300, in particular the sawed-off barrel. So in other words, you cannot use the dual trigger attachment unless you are using the sawed-off barrel. Now, a few things to point out here. The sawed-off barrel will cut your range down by quite a bit. In fact, with the dual trigger, your one-shot capability is only out to like 2.9 meters, which is pretty rough. But it's a sawed-off barrel, so you get a lot more mobility and you're going to have a wider spread. I do think that this barrel should be getting a little bit of a buff. It's nowhere near as good as it should be, but I do think they can start by giving it more mobility. And in terms of the dual trigger specifically, I think that they should just lock the dual trigger unless you are using the sawed-off barrel. This way you're killing two birds with one stone, where yes, it's still a one-shot, it's still actually fun, you can still use it, it's not completely useless, but it's also not overbearingly strong at range. It's not going to one-shot in any staircase and Vandal unless you're kissing distance basically, or melee distance. So in my opinion, it's a really interesting and kind of fun way to go about it, making it to where that sawed-off barrel actually becomes used, and also locking that dual trigger so it's not going to be crazy overbearing with any crazy one-shot potential past 5 meters, not even 3 meters basically. Now, there's probably a bunch of other ways to handle it. Of course, you could just nerf the range into the ground with all of its attachments and just let you use it whatever, but I think this is a more interesting way to go. You could also make it to maybe where this is a aftermarket part, and then you can nerf the range, and then you can only use this thing if you don't have a barrel equipped. That's another potential way to go, but in my opinion, I like having this idea of rocking the sawed-off barrel, killing your range, but making it super, super deadly in that 3 meter range. I think that sounds like a lot of fun. But of course, that's basically just my idea, and I want to keep this video short, so now I want to know down below in the comments, what are all of your thoughts about this shotgun? I don't know if you guys got to play with it when it was reintroduced in Season 1 Reloaded, but yep, it was still really, really broken. So what are your guys' thoughts on how this should be balanced? Do you think that this thing with the dual trigger should be one-shotting at all? Do you think it should just always be a two-shot and never have the capability to one-shot? And with all that being said, guys, I will see you in the next video.
Marking the rest of that squad on the attack map. Get hunting. Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies.